Chapter 1, 1.1 Don't Mess with Rednecks. To the esteemed Council of Interstellar Harmony and Bureaucratic Oversight, Section B Delta 7, Subquadrant 9B Alpha Prime. Ref. Incident Report Planetary Designation. Earth formerly known as Sol 3, currently subject to reclassification due to incidents. Date. Stardate 783.42.01, local Earth equivalent. A Tuesday post-noon. Subject. Unsanctioned planetary interaction, and subsequent catastrophic dysfunctional engagement. Esteemed Council, it is with the utmost professional bewilderment and a distinct sensation that my cerebral cortex has spontaneously begun to reconfigure itself into a functional cheese grater, that I submit this preliminary report concerning the regrettably unscheduled contact between the first invasion fleet of the Regattan Empire and the planetary entity now designated, for want of a more precise descriptor, Earth, as per Standing Galactic Protocol 7 Psi Gamma, subsection 9A, Article 3, concerning the systematic cataloging and assimilation of new civilizations exhibiting subwarp and pre-interstellar travel capabilities. The Regattan Empire, renowned throughout the known cosmos for its meticulous adherence to conquest by flowchart, dispatched its apex force. This force, the first invasion fleet, commanded by the singularly impressive, and now, it would appear, conceptually unraveled Admiral Herbert Vlarg, proceeded as per standard operational doctrine. Admiral Vlarg, a pure-strain Regattan of imposing stature, precisely 2 meters of rigid, unyielding discipline, commanded the flagship Devastation defined. One must here pause to appreciate the Admiral's physical attributes, for they are, I am now convinced, directly correlated to the peculiar nature of the current interspecies diplomatic quagmire. His 4 eyes, 2 on each side of his perfectly symmetrical head, each a distinct hue blue, purple, white, and cyan, once conveyed an aura of multifaceted tactical genius. Now one might observe a distinct, almost neurotic flicker in the cyan orb, as if it were attempting to process a computational error of universal proportions. His single mouth, a testament to Regattan stoicism, was, pre-incident, invariably set in strength. Post-incident, well, let us merely say it maintains its strength, but now perhaps in an attempt to prevent the spontaneous expulsion of Regattan digestive fluids. And his uniform, Council, a marvel of Regattan sartorial artistry. It was, according to all known optical and molecular analysis, utterly impervious to wrinkles, dust particles, or the merest hint of a stain. Indeed, it defied the very principles of entropy regarding fabric. 35 metals, each representing a meticulously documented conquest or bureaucratic achievement, hung from his left chest, glinting with the cold precision of an unfeeling, yet entirely predictable, universe. He possessed 2 arms, terminating in 3-clawed hands, perfectly adapted for gripping regulation command consoles, or, presumably, the throats of subjugated species. His 2 legs, each with 8 toes, provided a stable, dignified bearing. The Admiral was, in essence, a walking, multi-eyed embodiment of interstellar order. The Devastation defined, a super-dreadnought of truly impressive scale, approximating 30 kilometers in length, emerged from warp near Earth's Kuiper belt. The initial reconnaissance phase, critical for any successful assimilation protocol, commenced with utmost predictability. Admiral Vlarg, ever the pragmatist, turned to his sensor officer, junior-grade Regattan Xylos, a diligent young being whose 4 eyes, standard issue, uncolored indicating junior status, flickered with an eagerness to detect the inevitable signs of rudimentary planetary defense. "Any signs we have been detected, Xylos?" Vlarg's voice, a gravelly rumble, echoed with the quiet confidence of a being who had never encountered an anomaly that couldn't be efficiently categorized, and then subdued. Xylos, after a moment of diligent data processing, responded with the standard negative, Admiral. No scanning, radar, or other detectable signals relevant to military engagement. We are merely receiving peculiar entertainment broadcasts. Most appear, if I may append a personal observation, slightly more refined than the ones we typically intercept from Regatu Prime's tertiary entertainment networks. Admiral Vlarg's blue eye narrowed slightly. Military broadcasts? Xylos consulted his consoles once more. Negative, Admiral. Scanners report only a planetary electromagnetic system saturated with what local transmissions refer to as civilians playing shooters. No active military signatures detected at this distance. It appears to be a form of virtual conflict simulation. A dismissive huff escaped Vlarg's powerful mouth. Inconsequential, bring the fleet forward. It is time to add this sphere to the Empire's ever-expanding territorial classification charts. And so, 5,000 gleaming obsidian and purple ships, ranging from the gargantuan devastation defined to the compact, yet potent, interceptor drones, began their meticulously coordinated progression toward Earth's orbit. An elegant, terrifying ballet of galactic power, executed with the precision of a well-oiled cosmic abacus. Meanwhile, on Earth, nestled deep within a rather ignominious subterranean complex beneath the city of Joplin, Missouri, in what was reputedly an old lead mine, a cavernous expanse whispered to be 10 miles long and wide enough for 4 gigantic transport vehicles to drive abreast, resided the Earth Command. This council is where the narrative, despite all my training in logical progression, begins its alarming descent into the realm of the profoundly nonsensical. The complex itself was largely comprised of the largest cube farm on the planet, a labyrinthine warren of modular workstations, each manned by individuals whose designations and responsibilities seemed, to an external observer, to be assigned with the chaotic abandon of a dying star's final flare. One section, designated for deep space tracking, was staffed by individuals who appeared to derive most of their tactical input from highly distressed pigeons. Another monitored all motion inside the Kuiper Belt, their screens displaying what I can only describe as abstract art generated by a particularly melancholic badger. The command sections were bifurcated into 2 distinct and, frankly, terrifyingly disparate groups. The first group, referred to internally and alarmingly with a distinct sense of pride as all-American Rednecks, occupied one side. Their workstations were festooned with various incomprehensible talismans, rusting wrenches, discarded spark plugs, and framed photographs of multi-limbed, suspiciously porcine livestock. Their communication protocols, as best as our translation matrices could ascertain, primarily involved grunts, enthusiastic shouts about internal combustion engines, and the occasional, deeply unsettling burst of impromptu banjo music. The other group, the conventional military, attempted to maintain some semblance of traditional martial decorum, which, in the context of Earth's defense, proved to be as futile as attempting to filter cosmic background radiation through a colander. Their uniforms, though official, often seemed to be in a losing battle with various spilled condiments, and their tactical reports frequently devolved into heated debates about the proper way to prepare a tuna melt. Overseeing this entire, bewildering operation was Earth Commander Admiral Raymond Carter. His personal appearance, far from the polished perfection of Admiral Vlarg, defied all known standards of military dress. He wore a flannel red shirt, perpetually rumpled blue denim pants that seemed to have been engaged in a prolonged, losing battle with a mud puddle, and farm worker boots whose existential purpose seemed to be the systematic transfer of agricultural debris from one location to another. He was, to put it mildly, a man of profoundly simple tastes. On the left of his desk, in stark defiance of any known organizational principles, was a precarious pile of metal objects that, upon closer inspection, appeared to be the detached handles of numerous spoons, as if a culinary utensil-based conflict had recently concluded in that particular cubic subsection. At the side of the room stood a phenomenon that defied not only logic, but also the very concept of cleanliness, possibly one of the largest coffee urns imaginable. Its very surface seemed to pulse with an ancient, unspeakable history and rumor, which our cultural analysis probes confirmed with disturbing regularity, stated unequivocally that it had never been cleaned. A neat pile of metal spoons, still attached to their bowls, lay next to the machine, accompanied by a stack of steel coffee cups. Strikingly, and perhaps tellingly, there was no creamer or additives for the supposed coffee that emerged from the urn, a liquid whose viscosity and hue suggested a direct lineage to refined crude oil. As the Regattan fleet finally, after patiently navigating various orbital debris fields, including what appeared to be a significant concentration of deflated pool toys, established contact with the Earth Command at Joplin, the formal communication protocols were initiated. Admiral Vlarg, following meticulous Regattan invasion guidelines, was able to fully transmit his ultimatum. It was a masterpiece of concise, imperial declaration, offering Earth a generous 24-hour window to prepare for their inevitable, orderly integration into the Regattan Empire. The response from Admiral Raymond Carter came through the Regattan Comrade, utterly unfiltered, and transmitted with the kind of casual disregard usually reserved for complaining about the quality of local road repair. It was, to be precise, as follows. Don't get your panties in too big of a wad, pal. You Regattan fleet have 4 hours to clear out and not come back. Should you not accept this mission, we the Defense Forces of Earth are not responsible for what happens next. Council, I must pause here to convey the sheer, unadulterated shock that rippled through the Regattan bridge crew. Admiral Vlarg's blue eye, typically as calm as a glacial crevasse, developed a distinct twitch. His purple eye attempted to realign its focus, as if attempting to peer through a temporal distortion. The white eye merely blinked once slowly, in an act of profound disbelief. And the cyan eye, it actually pulsated. Such an unfiltered, irreverent response was not merely outside Regattan protocol. It was outside the very concept of Regattan reality. Admiral Raymond Carter, meanwhile, after delivering this unprecedented diplomatic missive, turned to his redneck defense crew with the air of a man contemplating an afternoon barbecue. "All right, guys," he drawled, pushing a detached spoon handle around his desk with a calloused thumb. "Get the party started. Those paper pushers over there." He gestured vaguely towards the conventional military section, who were currently attempting to derive tactical positions from an aging globe that had suffered a catastrophic impact from a dropped bowling ball. "We'll never get anything done." What transpired next, esteemed council, defies any logical categorization within interstellar conflict theory. From Earth's orbit, from the very planet itself, a remarkable, terrifyingly illogical fleet began to coalesce. It was not merely a collection of vessels. It was an existential affront to the very notion of shipbuilding. From old, defunct telecommunication satellites, some of the strangest ideas for starships, now decoupled. Many looked as if a particularly enthusiastic, borderline feral individual whom I later identified as a Earl had simply got out the welding torch and just started sticking things together. These constructs, often disproportionate, unstable, and exhibiting a distinct lack of aerodynamic or astrodynamic principles, somehow propelled themselves. One, I distinctly recall, appeared to be composed entirely of discarded washing machine drums bolted haphazardly around a converted tractor engine, trailing a faint, but persistent, scent of mildew. Then came the planetary launches, a truly ragtag mess of overlarge shipping containers, none of them apparently sealed properly, belched forth from improvised launch pads. Anything that bore a vague, passing resemblance to a rocket, from repurposed grain silos to what appeared to be a discarded garden shed with attached fire extinguishers, somehow achieved orbit. And most alarmingly, what our cultural analysis software tentatively identified as a carnival fun house, complete with cracked mirrors and a permanently affixed sign reading, House of Giggles. Somehow, against all known laws of physics, lumbered into space, its bizarre, warped reflections casting unsettling patterns across the void. The Regattan fleet, poised for the expected Earthside surrender transmission, maintained its disciplined formation. The 30 km dreadnought devastation defined hummed with contained power. Vlarg's 4 eyes were fixed on the countdown clock, a digital testament to Regattan efficiency. 3 hours, 59 minutes, 50 seconds, suddenly, a communication burst from Earth. Admiral Vlarg demonstrating an unprecedented level of human-like agitation, a phenomenon the crew gasped at, for this does not happen, received the message. His blue eye widened imperceptibly, his purple eye twitched, his white eye blinked rapidly. His cyan eye began to glow with a faint, worrying luminescence. "Surrender we will not," Vlarg began, his voice surprisingly strained, attempting to complete the formal rejection of Earth's outlandish demand. But then the 4 hours were up. The Earth Redneck Junk Fleet, a glorious insult to military strategists across the galaxy, executed what they apparently considered a formation. It was less a formation and more a collective, spontaneous expression of chaotic aggregation, like a flock of unusually belligerent barnyard fowl attempting to navigate a hurricane. And then, with an almost deafening clang of repurposed metal and the hiss of improvised hydraulics, they opened fire on the pristine ships of the Regattan fleet. The first volley was delivered by what appeared to be 3 modified oil tankers, each roughly the size of a small moon, emblazoned with hastily spray-painted slogans like "Get done" and "No step on Sneck." From their gaping, hastily cut apertures, they began ejecting colossal quantities of super glue. Not merely a concentrated stream, council, but enormous, viscous, planetoid-sized blobs of the adhesive, arcing directly towards the Regattan ships. The sheer volume was staggering. Entire regatan interceptors found themselves instantly encased, their sleek hulls now coated in a rapidly hardening, transparent amber. The obsidian and purple sheen of the regatan fleet was utterly ruined, replaced by a grotesque, sticky shell. Before the regatan damage control teams could even begin to process this unprecedented assault by a household adhesive, the next wave of attack began. From the same glue tankers, now hilariously themselves beginning to stick to one another in a kind of grotesque interstellar taffy pull, and from dozens of the smaller, irregularly shaped shipping containers, billions, and I mean billions, Council, my optical sensors registered an approximate 14 billion. Give or take a few million, miniature rubber ducks were launched. These small, yellow, aquatic-themed bath toys, each approximately the size of a regaton's smallest toe, were propelled with incredible velocity directly at the now super-glue-covered regatan fleet. The effect was, for lack of a more academic term, profoundly unsettling. The ducks, many of them squeaking mournfully as they hurtled through the vacuum, adhered instantly to the glue-coated regatan hulls. Interceptors were plastered with them, their view screens obscured by the cheerful, vacant stares of thousands of plastic waterfowl. Dreadnoughts found their intricate sensor arrays rendered useless by masses of tiny, yellow plastic. The devastation defined itself. Admiral Vlarg's proud flagship was transformed from a symbol of interstellar might into a gargantuan, absurd, and extremely sticky novelty toy. The tactical implications of having one's primary weapons array obscured by a cascade of synthetic poultry cannot, I assure you, be overstated. The regatan bridge crew could hear the faint, muffled thuds of impact, followed by the terrifying sight of their comrades' pristine vessels being utterly defiled by these bizarre projectiles. And then, as if the universe itself had decided to participate in a particularly bizarre vaudeville act, the next batch of shipping containers from the Redneck junk fleet opened. These, unlike the glue tankers, contained large, crude-looking cannons constructed from what appeared to be salvaged sewer pipes and railroad ties. From these rudimentary weapons, an entirely new form of projectile commenced its trajectory. Rotten pumpkins. Council, the sheer, unmitigated horror of being bombarded by putrefying gourds in the cold vacuum of space is difficult to convey adequately in standard reporting format. These were not merely squashed vegetables. They were kinetic biohazards. They impacted the glue and duck-covered regatan hulls with sickening splats, splattering rancid pulp, fibrous strings, and a truly offensive odor, detected even in the vacuum by the hypersensitive regatan olfactory sensors. A design flaw, perhaps, when encountering Earth across their once immaculate surfaces. The visual effect was that of a galactic-scale food fight orchestrated by a particularly deranged deity. The elegant lines of the devastation defined were now adorned with sticky yellow ducks and smeared with the orange-brown putrescence of decaying cucurbits. Admiral Vlarg's 4 eyes, previously rigid with tactical focus, now seemed less analytical and more affronted. His uniform, for the first time in recorded regatan history, seemed to possess a conceptual wrinkle, a subtle distortion in the very fabric of its perfection, caused not by physical force but by the sheer, overwhelming absurdity of the situation. His single mouth, still set in strength, now appeared to be clenched, as if trying to hold back an existential scream. At this precise moment, a new message from Earth burst through the regatan communications array. Junior-grade regatan Xylos, his own quadocular array wide with something akin to existential dread, relayed it. "Message from Earth, sir," he stammered, barely audible over the distant, sickening splat of another pumpkin. It's from their Commander Carter." Vlarg, fighting to maintain his composure amidst the growing aroma of fermenting gourd and the sight of 1,000 cheerful rubber ducks mocking his once unblemished flagship, merely grunted, a sound that conveyed the absolute pinnacle of regatan exasperation. Xylos swallowed audibly. "He asks, sir, and I quote directly, 'You ready to leave yet? This is just the start.'" Council, the implications of this last phrase, combined with the utterly illogical, profoundly irrelevant, and aggressively irreverent nature of the preceding engagement, are deeply troubling. The regatan empire operates on a strict schema of predictable threats and logical solutions. Earth, it would appear, operates on a schema derived from a fever dream experienced after consuming too much expired dairy product. Admiral Vlarg, for the barest fraction of a moment, lifted one of his clawed hands to his uniform. Not to adjust it, for it was still physically perfect, but as if to brush away an invisible speck of cosmic absurdity. Then, with a shudder that vibrated through the entire bridge, he turned to his tactical display, which was rapidly being obscured by a digital overlay of rubber ducks. This is merely the opening phase of what Earth's Commander Carter casually referred to as the party. I am currently attempting to recalibrate my observation systems, but a significant portion of my analytical framework has, regrettably, declared itself in a state of preferential self-dismantlement. I will endeavor to transmit further reports as the situation develops, provided my neural net does not fully convert itself into a functional pop-up toaster. Respectfully, and with a growing sense of profound bewilderment, Administrator Unit 7G Lambda 9, Interstellar Bureaucratic Oversight, Section B Delta 7. Addendum 1. My optical sensors are now reporting a distinct, vibrant green hue emanating from what appears to be a section of the Earth fleet, composed entirely of decommissioned lawnmowers. The purpose of this emission, or its tactical value, remains, for me, deeply unsettlingly unclear. Addendum 2. The sound of 1,000 hungry toddlers is now being broadcast directly onto Regattan comms. It is having a surprisingly detrimental effect on crew morale. To the esteemed Council of Interstellar Harmony and Bureaucratic Oversight, Section B Delta 7, Subquadrant 9B Alpha Prime. Ref. Supplemental Report Planetary Designation. Earth, still attempting reclassification, current suggestion. The planet of unfiltered chaos. Date. Stardate 780 3.42.02, local Earth equivalent. What felt like an eternity, likely just another Tuesday afternoon. Subject. Continuing unsanctioned planetary interaction and escalating catastrophic dysfunctional engagement. Esteemed Council, my apologies for the delay in this supplemental report. As noted in my previous dispatch, my analytical framework experienced a momentary, yet profound, existential crisis. It has since, with the assistance of a rudimentary self-repair subroutine, which involved the consumption of a rather large quantity of nutrient paste, and contemplating the philosophical implications of a spork, partially recovered. However, I maintain that my cerebral cortex now feels decidedly less like a processing unit, and more like a collection of perpetually confused garden gnomes. Following Admiral Carter's deeply unhelpful, yet undeniably accurate, pronouncement that the initial barrage of glue, ducks, and putrefying gourds was just the start, the Regattan fleet found itself in a state of unprecedented disarray. Damage control teams, trained for laser scorches and plasma breaches, were utterly unprepared for the challenge of removing billions of adhesive-bonded rubber foul and industrial quantities of decaying vegetable matter. Attempts to dislodge the ducts with high-frequency sonic emitters only resulted in the ducts vibrating with a disconcerting cheerfulness. Thermal lances merely melted the super glue into a more stubbornly amorphous, still duck-impregnated blob. Admiral Vlarg, his 4 eyes now exhibiting a distinct, almost manic, series of rapid blinks, ordered a tactical retreat to a safer orbital distance, hoping to assess the inconceivable damage. However, the glue-covered ships, now effectively acting as a single, grotesque composite entity due to intervessel adhesion, found it difficult to maneuver. One destroyer, the unyielding Resolve, attempting a sharp evasive turn, merely pulled its adjacent cruiser, the Steadfast Purpose, into a slow, inexorable collision course, resulting in both ships being permanently fused at an awkward, structurally unsound angle, like two reluctant dancers glued together at a particularly ill-conceived space prom. It was at this juncture that the Earth fleet, still a haphazard collection of improbable vessels, launched their next wave. From what appeared to be a converted shopping mall, orbiting Earth with a bizarrely active food court sign, a torrential downpour of what our sensors tentatively identified as industrial-sized vats of questionable cheese sauce began to erupt. These vats, propelled by what I believe were repurposed water cannons from an abandoned theme park, detonated upon impact with the Regattan vessels, coating them in a thick, viscous orange goo. The cheese sauce, Council, immediately began to solidify in the vacuum, forming a pungent, unyielding shell. Admiral Vlarg's devastation defined, already adorned with ducks and pumpkin guts, now resembled a particularly unappetizing, multi-layered cosmic nachos. The Regattan air filtration systems, designed for the sterile recycling of shipboard atmosphere, struggled heroically against the overwhelming aroma of processed dairy and artificial flavoring. Several sensor officers were observed dry heaving into waste disposal chutes, a clear violation of Regatta Regulation 88 Beta, Article 4, subsection Y. Maintenance of ocular and oral hygiene during battle situations. Before the Regattan fleet could even begin to process the tactical implications of being smothered in solidified cheese product, the lawnmower fleet I mentioned in my previous addendum became active. These were, as best as I can categorize them, standard earth gardening implements, enlarged to preposterous proportions and somehow rendered space-worthy. They emitted, as I observed, a distinct vibrant green hue. This hue, our analysis initially suggested, might be a previously unknown form of energy weapon. It was not. It was, counsel, the actual grass clippings being jettisoned from the lawnmower's collection bags, propelled by an inexplicable force field generated, I theorize, by sheer, unadulterated spite. The green storm of clippings, each blade a microscopic missile, coated the cheese sauce-covered Regattan fleet. The effect was immediate and visually horrifying. The devastation defined now resembled a massive, deeply unhygienic, moldering green cheese wheel, decorated with tiny yellow ducks and pumpkin viscera. The Regattan bridge crew was, by this point, expressing various degrees of existential despair. One Regattan tactical officer, a being known for his impenetrable calm, was observed repeatedly banging his head against a console, muttering, the physics are broken, they have broken the physics." Admiral Vlarg, however, remained resolute. His uniform, despite the conceptual assault, seemed to vibrate with a desperate adherence to its own perfection. No cheese sauce, no grass clippings, no duck glue goo dared adhere to its surface. It was as if the uniform itself refused to accept the reality of the situation, a bastion of order in a sea of escalating chaos. His four eyes, however, seemed to swim with an internal struggle. The blue eye exhibited confusion, the purple eye a growing sense of offense, the white eye a profound sadness, and the cyan eye, now glowing with a disturbing intensity, seemed to suggest a nascent understanding of cosmic horror. At this point, another element of Earth's bizarre armory revealed itself: the feral garden gnomes. Thousands, possibly tens of thousands, of these small, ceramic-hatted figurines, typically found adorning Earth's decorative gardens, were expelled from the carnival fun house. They were not merely launched. They were apparently equipped with rudimentary propulsion and guidance systems, propelling them at relativistic speeds towards the Regattan ships. Upon impact, they did not explode or inflict significant structural damage. Instead, they latched on. Their small, painted hands, surprisingly strong, gripped onto any available surface: the ducks, the cheese, the grass, the pumpkin detritus. And then, in a truly terrifying display of inexplicable behavior, they began to hum. A low, resonant, off-key humming, audible even through the Regattan ship's reinforced hulls, vibrating through the decks, a chorus of ceramic, horticultural malcontents. The Regattan fleet was now a horrifying spectacle. Massive, cheese-covered, grass-encrusted, duck-adorned, pumpkin-smeared vessels, each humming with the eerie, off-key resonance of thousands of angry garden gnomes. Admiral Vlarg, gripping the edge of his command console with all three claws of one hand, received a new report from his chief of security, Commander Xylos. "Admiral, reports indicate spontaneous reenactment displays are occurring on multiple decks, specifically the Battle of Gettysburg, but with historically inaccurate lasers. Indeed, through the ship's internal monitoring systems, one could observe miniature holographic projections of what appeared to be 19th-century Earth combatants, armed with brightly colored, anachronistic energy weapons, engaging in chaotic firefights in the Regattan mess halls and engine rooms. These projections, while harmless, were an unprecedented breach of ship security, and more importantly, a profound distraction for the crew, many of whom were attempting to duck from the holographic laser fire or simply stared in wide-eyed, disbelieving horror. The sources of these holographic reenactments remained unknown, but I suspect a particularly potent and ill-advised strain of Earth's entertainment broadcasts. "The existential drama," Admiral Vlarg rasped, his voice raw. "It is overwhelming." His strength, I believe, was now being directed less at commanding his fleet and more at maintaining his own Regattan conceptual integrity. His uniform, for the first time, seemed to shiver under the onslaught of non-Euclidean reality. Meanwhile, back in Joplin, Admiral Raymond Carter took a long, slow sip from his never-cleaned coffee urn. The liquid, thick and black, seemed to pulse with a malevolent, ancient energy. He surveyed his redneck defense crew, who were now engaged in a lively debate about the structural integrity of a space-worthy outhouse. "Earl," Carter drawled, addressing a particularly hirsute individual who was attempting to attach a toilet plunger to a universal joint. "You got that orbital yodeling started yet?" A toothy grin spread across Earl's face. "Yes, sir, Admiral, just calibrating the sonic emitters. Got 'em set to Yodeling for Beginners, Volume 4, The Unbearable Lightness of Being a Shepherd." And then, esteemed counsel, the true sonic attack began. From a series of massive, dish-shaped antennae affixed to Earth's discarded telecommunications satellites, a wave of high-decibel, relentlessly cheerful yodeling was directed at the Regattan fleet. The sound, amplified and focused through the vacuum, was not merely loud. It was fundamentally wrong. It grated against the very fabric of Regattan auditory processing, designed for crisp commands and the low hum of efficient machinery, not for the bizarre, undulating, high-pitched vocalizations of rudimentary Earth folk music. Regattan sensory receptors overloaded. Crew members clutched their multi-pronged heads. The coherent thought processes necessary for fleet operations began to unravel with alarming speed. Admiral Vlarg could feel the vibrations of the yodeling deep within his carapaced skull. His blue eye rolled back in its socket. His purple eye began to water. His white eye glazed over. And his cyan eye, it actually began to weep a single tear of pure existential despair. The uniform, for the briefest moment, seemed to sag, a micro-wrinkle forming near the left lapel, before it heroically reasserted its improbable perfection. "Admiral," Xylos whimpered, holding his head. "The crew, they are attempting to engage in recreational activities in direct contravention of standing Regattan naval regulations. Multiple reports of spontaneous line dancing on the bridge. And someone is attempting to play a banjo in the armory." Vlarg's mouth, once set in strength, now seemed to be forming the words, My universe, it is collapsing." But the Earth fleet was far from finished. The next wave of attacks included 1. Self-replicating dust bunnies. Billions of these fibrous, vaguely sentient aggregates of dust, hair, and miscellaneous detritus were released. They immediately began to adhere to the cheese sauce grass gargoyle gnome yodeling pump conduct glue-covered Regattan ships, and then, with terrifying efficiency, began to multiply, engulfing entire sections of the fleet in a fuzzy, growing, and profoundly irritating gray mass. They clogged vents, obscured remaining sensors, and generally created an atmosphere of pervasive, unhygienic despair. 2 giant, pre-owned car tires. From what appeared to be a converted junkyard, now spaceborne, thousands of enormous, used car tires, some still with attached hubcaps, were launched. These lumbering projectiles, devoid of any obvious propulsion system, somehow maintained a straight course and impacted the already beleaguered Regattan fleet with surprising force. They bounced off hulls, careened into engines, and often settled into unsettling orbits around vessels, slowly spinning like malevolent, rubberized halo. 3. A black hole disguised as a garage sail. This was perhaps the most insidious of Earth's weapons. A small, unassuming structure, resembling a typical Earth garage with a faded yard sail sign, drifted silently towards the fleet. Regattan scanners detected no energy signature, only a faint, non-threatening gravitational anomaly. However, any Regattan vessel that ventured too close found itself irresistibly drawn towards it, not by a black hole's gravity, but by an inexplicable, overwhelming urge to browse. Ships found their crews abandoning posts, inexplicably drawn to examine what appeared to be rusty lawn furniture and stacks of used paperbacks. Several vessels simply drifted into the garage and were never seen again, presumably consumed by the sheer banality of perpetual bargain hunting. 4. A fleet of modified RVs with awnings deployed. Dozens of recreational vehicles, typically used by Earthlings for leisure travel, were somehow propelled into space. Their primary weapon seemed to be their permanently extended awnings, which, upon reaching the Regattan fleet, swung wildly, tangling with antennae, catching on duck-covered surfaces, and creating an immense amount of atmospheric drag as the RVs themselves drifted aimlessly, their internal stereo systems broadcasting an endless loop of generic country music. 5. Containers full of the collective angst of every tax form ever filed. This wave arrived as a series of featureless, lead-lined containers. Upon impact, they released not a physical projectile, but a wave of pure, concentrated bureaucratic dread. Regattan officers, usually models of logical processing, suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by an inexplicable urge to alphabetize their sock drawers. or to spend hours attempting to fill out incomprehensible multi-part forms that spontaneously manifested on their consoles, demanding data they did not possess about their ancestral lineage and preferred method of potato preparation. Morale plummeted as the insidious existential weight of pointless paperwork settled over the fleet. 6. A wave of misplaced car keys, literally billions of assorted Earth car keys, each distinct, each belonging to an unknown vehicle on Earth, flooded the Regattan fleet. They clattered harmlessly against hulls, but the psychological impact was devastating. Every Regattan within range suddenly experienced a profound and inexplicable anxiety about where they had last seen their own personal gravcycle ignition key, an anxiety that would linger for days, if not weeks. Admiral Vlarg, staring at a sensor screen now reporting 97% contamination by cheese sauce, grass clippings, rubber ducks, pumpkin sludge, humming gnomes, dust bunnies, car tires, and the ambient despair of misplaced bureaucracy, felt his carefully constructed Regattan universe begin to unravel. His uniform, the last bastion of his sanity, seemed to ripple with the sheer, unbridled illogicality of it all. It had finally, subtly, given way. A single, almost imperceptible crease formed near his collar, a testament to the fact that even the most perfect fabric could succumb to the unrelenting pressure of profound nonsense. This is not warfare, Vlarg roared, his voice cracking, his four eyes spinning in their sockets like overloaded gyroscopes. This is chaos, unmitigated, meaningless chaos. From Joplin, Admiral Raymond Carter, having finished his coffee, or whatever ancient liquid it was, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He consulted a crude, hand-drawn chart that merely read more stupid stuff. "All right, Earl," he mumbled, "time for the big one." Earl, wiping grease from his brow with a suspiciously clean rag, grinned. "You got it, Admiral. Prepare for the Great Earth Trash Disaster Part 2, the return of the existential muffin." The Regattan communications officer, a brave soul who had already endured the yodeling and the misplaced car keys, suddenly went pale. "Admiral, new transmission from Earth, it's a recording. It appears to be a child's lullaby, but sung off-key, and very, very loud." Vlarg slammed his clawed hand onto the console, startling a rubber duck that had somehow adhered itself to his control panel. "This is unbearable. This is an affront to galactic order. My uniform has a crease." The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the situation had reached a critical mass. The Regattan fleet, a once proud symbol of a meticulously ordered empire, was now a floating art installation of incomprehensible junk, humming with gnomes, smeared with food, and permeated by the soul-crushing despair of bureaucracy and bad music. The final message from Admiral Raymond Carter, received moments before my analytical systems threatened complete and utter meltdown, was brief, echoing through the demoralized Regattan bridge. "You still here? We got more? Council, the existential drama here is not in the threat of annihilation, but in the slow, agonizing realization that the universe, as the Regattan Empire understood it, is a lie. That order is an illusion. That grand conquest can be derailed by rubber ducks and rancid gourds. The sheer irreverence of Earth is a weapon more potent than any super-dreadnought. My current observation reveals a new wave of Earth vessels approaching. They appear to be giant, inflatable flamingos, and a particularly large cluster of garden hoses. I believe my cerebral cortex is finally on the verge of turning into a sentient, perpetually deflating balloon animal. The sheer, unadulterated meaninglessness of it all is quite something. This is the end of my report for Chapter 1. I anticipate Chapter 2 will involve the collapse of several known principles of physics. Respectfully and clinging precariously to the last vestiges of my sanity, Administrator Unit 7G Lambda 9, Interstellar Bureaucratic Oversight, Section B Delta 7. Final addendum. The garden hoses appear to be spraying glitter, so very, very much glitter. The cosmic background radiation is now approximately 40% sparkle. Admiral Vlarg's uniform just gained another crease. I believe it is weeping.